On today's show, we are breaking down the first two games of preseason action for the Montreal Canadiens, highlighting winners, losers, which players might make the team out of camp, and where we're seeing chemistry build for the Laval Rocket for later on this season.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this show, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. I'm your host, Sebastian High, the USA scout over at Elite Prospects. And on today's episode, we're going to be focusing on the Montreal Canadiens here yet again. We have a couple Habs-themed episodes coming here this month, as we also broke down the entirety of the prospect pool, ranking them from number 29 all the way up to 1. But today, we're focusing more on what's been happening recently, as in the two first preseason games, the back-to-backs that featured two completely different lineups. I don't think a single player played in both games. And we have a lot of takeaways from these two appearances of the Habs, and I think that we're immediately already seeing races for the single roster spot that seems to be up for grabs here out of camp in terms of that third line right wing spot. But we're also seeing some potential areas for future consideration and potential headaches down the line if we're talking about left shot defense, especially on the third pairing with a guy like Adam Engström really pushing his way into that conversation. And we're also going to be seeing a lot of guys fostering chemistry for the Laval Rocket season this year. So a lot of interesting things have already happened in these first two games, both of which the Montreal Canadiens won. First against the Pittsburgh Penguins in the shootout, and then a bit more convincingly against the Philadelphia Flyers 4-2 in regulation. But it did include an empty net goal. So that's the outlook here for the episode today. We're going to kick things off by looking at the six biggest names that I kind of wanted to look at. And these are all very young players with one exception in Noah Dobson, but he's a new trade acquisition. So we're going to make a little exception for him. Then in the second segment, we'll be looking at some of the standout depth names that have really made their mark in the first in their first appearance of the season, even though it may be just in preseason. And finally, we're going to discuss who cracks the lineup, as well as which Laval line combinations are already beginning to kind of crystallize and grow chemistry together. But let's just jump straight into the show here by kicking things off with David Reinbacher, a player that has had a lot of eyes on him, even in the prospect showdowns before preseason even kicked off. He had a lot of people, whether in the media or just among the fan base, looking very, very carefully at his game and analyzing every little mistake quite thoroughly. And unfortunately, he did have a very glaring error against the Philadelphia Flyers. The first goal, I believe it was, by Anthony Richard off the break was almost exclusively down to David Reinbacher. It happened immediately off the goaltending change. So poor Capo Kakkonen got absolutely rocked right as he entered the crease with just one of the most dangerous chances for Philadelphia in the entire game. And it came off a play where the puck came to Reinbacher in the neutral zone. It just bounced off his stick, went between his legs, popped out into the middle of the ice, and he was a bit slow to recover, didn't really show the explosiveness that you'd want to see, and was just left chasing the play and chasing Anthony Richard, who was a very fast player, but Reinbacher had the positioning. He had the area to kind of, he was exactly where he should have been in order to be able to really diffuse that chance, and he wasn't able to. So we saw a similar thing happen in the prospect showcase as well, where there was a particular goal that was mostly down to Reinbacher himself, but I don't want to focus this much on just individual errors. These are small snapshots, and yes, preseason is also the time to kind of get these out of your system a little bit and get back into the run of things. But I've seen a lot of maturity from Reinbacher, especially in his on-puck game. Yeah, that bobbled puck going off his stick did not look very pretty at all, but he's shown the real ability to remain composed under pressure when he's in controlled possession, different thing from a bouncing puck going his way. And overall, I think that he's still showing all the elements that you want this player to be showcasing at this age. And the idea of a full season in Laval alongside a player like Adam Engström, I think, is just so exciting as a potential dominant AHL pairing, but also two very young players who move incredibly well and have a lot of mature, both physical and positional details that is beyond their age. So I don't think that we should be harping on Reinbacher at this point, and just wishing him a healthy season to really catch his footing here this year. Then Ivan Demidov, really big standout in that first game against the Pittsburgh Penguins, played really well on a line with Patrick Laine and Oliver Kapanen. He finished fourth among forwards in ice time behind those two line mates and Jake Evans, playing 18 and a half minutes in that game. Got 2 shots on target, but it was really in his handling. He broke a couple ankles. He had a great spinorama attempt along the boards on one entry to try to make something happen in a special way. He broke ankles behind the net as well in a similar fashion as he did in the prospect showcase as well. So just showing the ridiculous hands that he has. But the thing I was most impressed with, and I think the aspect that Demidov has focused massively on as well in the offseason, has been his ability to resist physical contact. He was seeking it out more often than not in that game, and I loved to see it. He was trying to get underneath opponents, playing inside them, getting close, and getting to the dirty areas more frequently too. He was not just trying to evade, trying to avoid at all times. He was sometimes also just driving head on at defenders. And when you add that aspect into the already adaptable and versatile toolkit that Ivan Demidov brings, it's very exciting to see what he might be able to do here in his rookie campaign. And the Calder certainly an award that I think he has a very decent shot at winning this year. Then we have Noah Dobson, the big trade acquisition of the offseason, who played the most minutes of any Hab in that game against Pittsburgh on a pairing with Mike Matheson. He logged 24 minutes of ice time already, got 5 shots, and he also had a really great chance at getting a primary assist with a really wonderful setup. It was either late in the third or in overtime. I forget exactly which, but he had a really good setup opportunity there. And I thought that in terms of the skating and kind of like the timing underlying his defensive skating, and overall just the habits in how he moves defensively, still refining a little bit, especially in terms of balancing out with Mike Matheson. These are both players whose instincts are to challenge, to be aggressive, and that can also lead to moments where they just get beat cleanly. So for those two players to work well together, they're still kind of, well, obviously it was their first game ever playing together on the same pairing. They're still figuring out each other's habits. So I felt a lot like at least the first half of that game was just Noah Dobson testing the waters a little bit with this new pairing mate, seeing how the flow functions. But I really thought that later on in the game in the offensive zone, Dobson was really creating things from the blue line, not quite as dynamically as Lane Hudson did in the game afterwards against the Philadelphia Flyers last night, but still a really, really good performance there from Noah Dobson, and one that I think should instill quite a lot of excitement among the Montreal Canadiens fan base. Then we've got Jacob Fowler, big shout out as well from that Pittsburgh game. Came in for Samuel Montembeault halfway through. Monty saved 20 of 21 shots in the first half, and in the second half and overtime, Fowler only faced 13 shots, but he made easily the best save of the entire game on either side. And that came in overtime. A great cross crease pass set up by the defender Shea. I believe it was for Avery Hayes, and he's also a right shot on a strong side. Got elevation on the puck, got it over the pad, but Jacob Fowler with an explosive right to left transition, got the glove up high enough. Just a beautiful textbook save that, honestly, reminiscent of Carey Price in terms of the combination of calmness and explosiveness leading into that like glove save off the transition. Like, very nostalgic, I think, for Canadiens fans to see Jacob Fowler in net, because he has a lot of tendencies that certainly do call back to the Montreal Canadiens legend that was just traded away last month. But we still have a couple more players to talk about here in this segment. First, we have Adam Engström, really great player. I think the Habs fans are really starting to discover just how special he is, an elite level skater, and a guy who's built up such a refined toolkit in terms of his defensive habits. He plays at least 3 or 4 years older than his age, and I think it's that combination of intelligence, timing, composure, and mobility. He's just so stifling defensively, and I thought that he was as good as Jaden Struble in that game. At least he played more minutes than Jaden Struble there in that game against Pittsburgh. I thought that he played better than Arbor Xhekaj did against Philadelphia, and while his lack of needing to go through waivers is certainly going to make it easier for the Habs to send him down to Laval for one more year of refinement, and especially if growing alongside David Reinbacher, I think that would be great for the pair of them. He's starting to knock on the door, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in the final segment, but that's definitely an area of the lineup to keep an eye on, because there might be a surprise at some point this season. If an injury arises down the left side and Adam Engström gets a call up, he might not let go of that role ever again. Then last but not least, for this first segment, we've got Owen Beck to shout out, who had a fantastic performance as well in that game against the Penguins. A player who just brings such maturity, such intelligence, such intensity and speed to both sides of the puck. And he has, I think, a really good shot at establishing himself as the candidate for third line right wing, which we'll also talk about later on in the show as a key battleground in terms of the roster spots available here coming out of camp. But with Owen Beck, who scored a goal by just keeping on trying right at the goal mouth, and it was the third attempt that ended up just going over the netminder, popping over him with a netminder down on his back on the ice. And it was just a play of tenacity and drive, and just a lack of any desire to quit or give up on the play. So I think with Owen Beck, you have a lot of these details that will make him a very appealing option to start in the NHL. He's built to be a bottom sixer, and he's focused all summer long on doubling down on his details and trying to get even better at them. And I saw that in this game. The pace with every puck touch, the intelligence and quickness behind his passes, the precision on those plays, all a step up from what I was seeing last season. So really exciting progression to see there from Owen Beck, and a player that I would love to see get a significant opportunity with the Montreal Canadiens this season. But that wraps up the first segment. In the next one, we're going to keep things rolling by looking at 5 guys who are maybe slightly more depth projections than these first 6 players that we talked about. But first, a quick message from our sponsors here at Locked On NHL Prospects. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure that you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet. Player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. The choice truly is yours. I know I'm always partial to same-game parlays, as they just make the action all the more exciting to take your swings, multiple of them, and hope that they're able to combine for just one glorious occasion. And it makes the action all the more gripping on the edge of your seat as you're watching on the TV in your living room. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app right now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. All right, let's keep this episode rolling, talking about another 5 standouts. But these guys are a little bit lower down the lineup, with perhaps one exception. First and foremost, now looking over at the game against the Philadelphia Flyers, a player that had really impressed the RDS commentary with Pierre Houde and Marc Denis, Vincent Rohrer. all-out intensity. Every single time I thought that he had a puck touch or a checking opportunity in the offensive zone, he got some gasps of surprise from the commentators due to just how professional his checking is. It is incredibly intense. He gets underneath opponents, gets under their sticks, is constantly stick lifting, pestering, trying different things, attacking from one angle before trying the next. And he's not the most smooth skater in the world, but he just pounds his way up the ice with just like one stride after another. The stride rate is really, really quick with Vinny Rohrer, and it's NHL or Swiss National League for him this season. But in this first game, he did not look out of place in terms of an NHL role. The big, I think, question mark is just the only spot that seems to be open is on that third line, unless you want to move Brendan Gallagher or Josh Anderson up to that spot. And we already have guys like Owen, Beck, and Oliver Kapanen competing for that position. Will Vincent Rohrer be able to beat them out? I'm not sure, but I really, really like Vinny Rohrer and had him ranked as the 16th top prospect in the organization, which I think is higher than quite a few people would have him ranked. And he's certainly a guy that has shown his abilities here in recent seasons, but to do it on Bell Center ice is certainly another special thing. And I expect him to go back to Switzerland here for this season, but next year, look at him to be a top 6 stalwart with Laval Rocket really pushing for call-ups as well from the Montreal Canadiens. Speaking of the Rocket, we've got a couple likely Rockets to talk about here as well, with Florian Xhekaj, who scored a goal against the Philadelphia Flyers by just being available in the high slot and receiving a puck that kind of bobbled out towards him and just quickly firing it off, even though it was way out in front of him, a bit of an awkward angle, but still generating quite a lot of power behind his release. And Xhekaj is a player that just, with his rampant physicality, I mean, he fought Nick Delorier in this preseason game, and he got rocked. I mean, he did not win that fight, but he stepped up to the plate against one of the most experienced fighters in the entire National Hockey League, who by the end also took it a little bit easy on Xhekaj once Delorier landed like 2 clean punches to the face, and Florian was against the boards and not really a threat to do anything else anymore. He did let up, and he gave the kid a little pat as well as a congratulations. But I really think that he's a player that's impressed me more and more and more with every viewing over the course of the past year and a half, in terms of also just the details in what he does on the ice. He's, incredibly vicious and intense and physical, but there's also a level of detail and intelligence there with Florian that isn't always there with his older brother Arbor. And we saw that in this game as well, where the Habs could have gone up onto the power play, and instead Arbor Xhekaj went and just retaliated for a little hook on him, and got himself a double minor instead. And the Habs are on the PK and conceded on that penalty kill. With Florian, I think there's a bit more of a sense of timing of when to do that. That seems a bit more intuitive, and certainly a player that I think could get called up to the Habs at some point this season. Moving along, we have Oliver Kapanen, another player that's going to have a real shot at that third line role with the Habs, and he got into games last season early on in the campaign before being sent over to Sweden with Timrå, and then also after coming back from that loan spell in the playoffs. And just so detailed, very intelligent, constantly scanning the ice, making quick decisions, scored the beautiful shootout winner against the Pittsburgh Penguins with a great little fake to the backhand before going back to the forehand and just like skating around the netminder and just slotting it into the back of the net. A very pretty shootout goal, but it's that intelligence, the ability of reading the players around him and just doing the right thing at the right moment. And it rarely is the flashiest thing or the most like dynamic incursion or anything like that. It's just plain effective. And that effectiveness, I think, is going to make him the favorite to really land that spot on the third line with the Montreal Canadiens, at least to start the year. Owen Beck is also a year younger than him. That gives Kapanen an advantage, who's also like the bigger body between the two, but really curious to see how that race continues to unfold. Then we've got Tyler Thorpe here, a really big winger who I've just loved to watch ever since the Habs drafted him just over a year ago. And he looked great in this preseason game. Really physical, really tough to play against. I thought he did quite well alongside Florian Jacki and Luke Tuck. I almost said Alex Tuck, but Luke Tuck. Very physical line. They were super engaged. Tuck kind of fell a bit more into the background on that line, but Thorpe was just using his body proactively, using it on puck as well to just pummel his way up along the boards and trying to get the pucks towards the middle of the ice. And I think he's going to have a really impressive rookie campaign with the Laval Rocket this season. Is he going to get to the same level in terms of goal scoring as Florian Jacki did as a rookie? Probably not. He probably won't be shooting 25%, unlike his counterpart did last season, but I think he's going to be just as effective this year. Last but not least, we have Philippe Méchard, who is coming into an incredibly important season in his development. If he isn't able to really pump up the gas in terms of the production and the creativity and the ability to take control of shifts, this might be a turning point for him where we might see him traded. We might see him not earn an extension. He's kind of at a crossroads in his career with the Montreal Canadiens, but I thought he looked good in this preseason game. He's getting opportunities. His shot looks heavier than I remembered it last season. And overall, I thought that he was leaning on his combination of pace and skating ability. And I think that's exactly what he has to do. Those are some of his clearest advantages, and doubling down on those and just making those clear on every single shift. That's one way to leave a good impression. That wraps things up here for the second segment. In the final one, we're going to wrap things up by looking at who might actually crack the lineup, what our predictions are, as well as potential Laval line combinations. But first, a quick message from our sponsors here at Locked On NHL Prospects. All right, let's wrap up the show here in the final segment, looking at who might crack the lineup here for the Habs first and foremost. And let's call this a three-way battle, but there's definitely two favorites, at least at this point in time. We've already talked about two of them in Owen Beck and Oliver Kapanen. We're talking about third-line right wing, but it could just as well be third-line center. Of course, Alex Newhook has the spot at center where his speed can do a lot of damage, but he's never been the most convincing face-off man. I think Owen Beck is definitely the best in the circle among these candidates and could certainly earn his way to the middle of the ice as well. But we're going to keep it at third-line right wing because we know that Martin St. Louis really does like, first of all, having another left shot center in there, which of course the two younger options are not, and Alex Newhook is. As well as the speed that he offers down up the middle of the ice rather than just being constrained and smothered into the boards along the edges. And there is a third player as well in contention for that third line role, and that is Joshua Roy, who got a spot in the game against the Philadelphia Flyers to really showcase himself. He got the shot alongside of Alex Newhook, which of course is also a vote of confidence, but as the game wore on, his minutes dwindled, and in the end, the only forward who played less than Joshua Roy was Juraj Slafkovsky, who missed at least a period of play with that massive gash to his, right cheek, I think, and even then, he only played 37 seconds more than Slav did. But still, I thought that he had his moments in terms of showing his play connecting ability down low in the offensive zone, making quick one-touch passes. But there was just a bit of a lack of intensity with Watt in this game, a little bit lackadaisical at times, I think. And that was a similar criticism to him in camp last year. That was something that got him booted off the roster unexpectedly a year ago, and this start is a bit reminiscent of that, which is not the best thing at this point in time. But yeah, we'll see how this season goes for Joshua Roy. I think if he's not able to really cement himself as one of the leading scorers with the Laval Rocket this year, or of course play in the NHL, might see him used as trade bait because the Habs have a lot of players to fill bottom six roles. And I don't think anyone's really expecting Joshua Roy to hit the top six upside that he was once touted to have anymore. So certainly an interesting storyline to keep an eye on there. But yeah, I think it's interesting if he still gets a shot to prove himself further as a contender for that third line role. But I think as we keep seeing preseason unfold now, you're going to see his line mates be lower quality than what he got in this first game because both Kapanen and Beck had better starts to preseason. Then Adam Engström, when might he force a tough decision at third left shot defense on the third pairing there? I think it might come this season, but it's going to entail quite a few ripple effects. Of course, if an injury arises and there's a spot in the lineup, I think he'll be the first guy to get a call up from the Laval Rocket. Maybe second guy, Mark Dalgaizo looked really good as well in preseason as a puck mover, but also went with a real physical edge and some snarl and some grit to his game. He's certainly the older, more experienced player, but yeah, like I've been so impressed with Adam Engström every single time I've tuned in to watch him, and I think that he's a guy that's going to force the Habs to move one or both of Jaden Struble and Arbor Xhekaj at some point in the next 12 months. That's my hot take. We'll see if it happens or not. And going back, of course, to that third line right wing spot, I forgot to make my prediction. My guess is that Oliver Kapanen gets that spot off in opening night, but Owen Beck has had the best start so far to training camp, so maybe he's able to get himself back into the running, but we can definitely bet on seeing both of these guys significantly in the National Hockey League at some point this season, if not to start the year, then later on due to injuries. Then I want to talk about two potential line combinations with the Laval Rocket that we saw in preseason games of these three players, these two groups of three players playing together and building some chemistry. First, we already mentioned the Tyler Thorpe, Florian Xhekaj, and Luke Tuch line. I thought that Xhekaj and Thorpe just very similar wavelength in terms of how they want to leverage their physicality. Xhekaj, of course, more violent. He searches contact more. But with Thorpe, he's just relishes playing with guys draped over his back, trying to muscle his way to the inside of the ice and seeking opportunities to leverage that big shot of his, just like Florian Xhekaj does. And I think that similarity might be also an avenue to building chemistry this season. I just don't think that Luke Tuch is the best complement. I think that these two guys could really use a deft playmaker on their other wing. A guy like Sean Farrell could be a great fit, or even a player like Jared Davidson, who does bring that similar level of physical engagement and snarl, but with a little bit more of that playmaking as well in him. Then we have the Sean Farrell, Owen Beck, and Philip Meshar line that we saw as well in that first game against the Pittsburgh Penguins. I really like how Sean Farrell and Owen Beck play together on the ice. I think that they are very complementary. Maybe could use a bigger guy on their right wing than Philip Meshar. Maybe a guy like Tyler Thorpe could be a great fit there as well. But I think that these three guys got on really, really well in terms of especially their transition attacks, attacking with speed through the neutral zone, entering the offensive zone. These are three intelligent players in terms of reading off of each other in the offensive zone, especially Farrell and Beck, and combining Farrell's playmaking touch with Beck's middle-driven intensity, two-way center ability, and overall just like middle lane goal scoring that he's shown, and he did score from that kind of area in that game. I thought that they worked really nicely together. But if we're talking about what we will see in Laval, maybe just make a little swap and move Tyler Thorpe onto that line and Philip Meshar onto the Xhekaj line. That could also work quite nicely. But I'll pass the question on to you. What are your expectations for who wins a spot out of camp here this season? And who are you expecting to really make a push over the course of the year through their performances in Laval to force their way up into the Habs lineup? I'd love to hear your thoughts, especially if you are a Habs fan as well. And that wraps things up here for us today. Thank you so much for listening. As always, for your second listen of the day, you can head on over to Locked On Fantasy Hockey, where Flip and Steel break down everything you can possibly want to know to build yourself a competitive and sustainable fantasy roster. I'm your host, Sebastian High. Thank you so much for tuning in, as always, and I'll catch you listening again very, very soon.